or that's good, or your favorite comedian. So I've kept it quite broad because when I was trying to think about my favorite joke, I honestly couldn't, because there are lots of jokes that I like. So just type in the chat. You can either post to everyone or just to me, but would love to know who some of your favorites are in comedy. So we've got Camille, Kathy Griffin. Yep. Not seen much of her stuff, but I want the bits that I have seen, I do enjoy. Mel, Knock Knock, Who's There, Yoda Lady. That's good. That's a classic knock knock jokes. Staff Lets Flats from Sarah. I tried that. I actually tried watching that when I was first looking for a flat in London, and it was scarily relevant, which I think is the point. But yeah, liked that a lot. John Robbins, yep. Oh, sorry, Mel. Your your joke was cut off before the last line, so I didn't give it the justice it deserves. I'm sorry about that. Hopefully everyone can see it in the chat. Grace Campbell, Anaya Magliano. Never heard of those, Lydia, but I'm going to refer to this chat afterwards so I can look up all of these people. Leanne, I love Guilty Feminist for the mix of serious topics and hilarious stories, jokes. The host, Deborah and Jessica Foster Q, who's on it a lot. I will admit my kind of style of comedy is very much kind of centered around feminism. So I will definitely be taking a look at that afterwards. Tim Key. Alice says comedy based on everyday scenarios. Yep. I think I will touch on that a little bit further on into the presentation. God, thank you all for the suggestions. I was actually a bit worried that no one would suggest things, so I appreciate this. Michael McIntyre, absolute classic. Yeah, Motherland. Not watched that, but again, we'll refer back. Ricky Gervais, yeah, I like Ricky Gervais. Perhaps a bit controversial, but he can be good at times. Maria Bamford, yeah. Observational comedy, we've heard, yeah. Satire, absolutely love a bit of satire. Lee Evans, yeah, definitely an oldie but a goldie. He's just one of the comedy greats, I think. Oh, a Romanian comedian recently. Now, just a side note, my boyfriend kind of loves Romanian culture. He loves Romanian football, so I will be passing this recommendation on to him. And yeah, Daisy May Cooper, this country, absolutely. Cool. I'm gonna stop there because the kind of comments have, pieced out a little bit. I suppose, you've shared all of your stuff, all of your kind of favorite types of comedy, comedians, etc. To tell you a little bit about my kind of favorites in comedy, I love Joan Rivers. I'm not sure if anyone is aware of Joan Rivers. Unfortunately, she's passed away now, but she was an American comedian who is often kind of seen as a real pioneer for women in comedy. I think that's why I resonate with her so much. And her style was very much blunt, self-deprecating, not safe for work kind of comedy, which I kind of resonate with as well. And she has kind of been quite an inspiration to me when I've been thinking about my own comedy. So that's one of my favorite comedians, and thank you all for sharing yours as well. What I'm going to talk about now is the agenda, so roughly what we're going to cover over the next hour or so. Going to start off with my career in market research, because I have worked in this industry for 7 years, so I need to kind of touch on that and want to touch on that a little bit. Then I'm going to move in to talk about my experience with stand-up comedy and kind of how I got to enjoying it so much and how I got to that point, basically. Then once I've done that, I'll kind of talk about the differences between stand-up and market research, because on the face of it, they are two very, very, very different professions. So I want to kind of, flag that and talk about the differences. But then the majority of this session will be focused on the similarities between the two, because whilst they are very different on the face of it, they actually do have a lot of similarities. So that's kind of where I'll spend most of this time. Then I'll kind of summarize the session in a nutshell, and then we'll hopefully have quite a bit of time for not only a Q&A where you might have questions about my experience with comedy, but also as we alluded to earlier, kind of sharing your experiences with side hustles or hobbies that you might have and how they have helped you in your career in market research. So, think about that whilst we go through the session. So, on to the main event. I'm going to start, as I said, by talking about my career in market research so far. I'll take you on a little bit of a trip down memory lane, how I joined the industry and where I've been since then. So my kind of entry into market research was actually quite untraditional. Whenever I talk to people in market research or hear from others in market research, a lot of them went to university, did a wide range of subjects. And then, the term is kind of fell into market research. That seems to be, the common way of entering the industry. But mine, as I said, was very untraditional 7 years ago anyway, thanks to the work of the MRS, who have launched an apprenticeship scheme. Hopefully that isn't so much the case these days, but I actually joined the market research industry as a 17-year-old apprentice in the research team at ITV. So that's where I started my career about 7 years ago. It feels like yesterday. And on screen, hopefully you can see a picture of me looking very fresh-faced, very chuffed with myself that I procured this lovely ITV mug, which I still have, actually. My mum did try and kind of steal it from me for a time because she loves ITV and she wanted an ITV mug, but I did take it back from her. It is rightfully mine, so I have it with me today. So that's me. I think this was after my first interview at ITV, so quite a long time ago. And I was at ITV for about 4.5 years. And during my time there, my roles were really to provide the rest of the business with insights into ITV's viewers, their programs, the talent that they have on their shows, the advertising and the sponsorship that goes around their shows, and then much, much more as well. And to do all of that stuff, we did have access to some kind of industry tools, Barb for viewing figures, and things like that. And we did have our own kind of panel of ITV viewers, but actually a lot of the work that we did at ITV was when we commissioned research agencies to conduct research on behalf of us. And I learned a lot from that kind of process. I learned how to work with research agencies, negotiate, kind of the management of research agencies. But because they did a lot of the doing, it meant that I wasn't kind of fully aware of the whole research process. I understood it at a top line level, but I wasn't kind of fully aware of kind of A to Z how it works. But I also knew that in order to progress my career in research, I really did need to understand the basics. I really did need to, understand, the project management side, the development of materials, recruitment, analysis, etc. And really the best place for me to do that was at a market research agency. That's what they specialize in. So in May of 2021, will not name what happened in that year. I'm sure we're all still traumatized by it. But I left ITV and then I joined Opinium as a research executive. And Opinium is a market research agency, for anyone who didn't know. And here is a picture, me with some old colleagues in the qualitative team at Opinium, looking very sparkly, very much show business. We were kind of preparing to get ready to go to the MRS Awards, I think back in 2022. So looking rather silly there, but enjoying ourselves. And when I joined Opinium, I joined as a mixed methods researcher. So I was working on both quant and qual projects for lots of different clients in lots of different sectors, finance, the political side of things, product development, you name it, I did it basically, which I think is one of the great benefits of working in an agency. Not only do you get exposure to the whole research process, but also different kind of clients, different industries, different problems that they're trying to solve. And I did that for a while. I was mixed methods for a while, but I realized that I had this calling for qualitative research. I had a real interest in it. I had a real passion for it. It's, something I just really enjoyed doing. So in 2022, I actually moved into a full-time qual position and was kind of in that role for over a year. But then in late 2023, an opportunity came up at Sky, who I'm sure you all know. Hopefully you do. They provide kind of TV, broadband, mobile, etc. And I just couldn't turn that opportunity down. And I didn't have kind of any quirky pictures to go with Sky, but I do have this one picture of me, which is a selfie in a mirror in a hotel in Leeds whilst I was conducting field work about Sky Mobile. So would really recommend this hotel. Actually, it was right next to the train station, so if you're ever in Leeds doing field work, I can't remember the name of it, which isn't very helpful, but it was a lovely hotel, great breakfast as well. So that's kind of my career in market research. I'm just going to pause and have some water. But what about my experience with stand-up comedy? Because that's the other main part of this session, stand-up comedy. And as I mentioned earlier, I've always loved comedy. I've always loved watching live stand-up comedy shows in a comedy club. I've always loved watching comedy TV programs, panel shows, etc., and also reading comedy books as well. But my love for comedy kind of goes much deeper than that. And just, it's not a trigger warning, but I will be kind of talking about bullying as I was growing up. But I think it's important to note this because that is really where my love of comedy came from. But essentially, I was kind of bullied very badly at school, kind of primary school, secondary school. And, I was always the butt of the joke, which obviously, at that time wasn't a great thing. People were laughing at me rather than with me. So, not great. But that time's passed, and I, started doing therapy a few years ago, related to that, but for other reasons as well. And during my time in therapy, I realized that actually I could reclaim that laughter, and I could actually encourage people to laugh with me rather than at me. And I think there is very much a difference between being laughed at and being laughed with. So, I decided to reclaim that and kind of empower myself and use it as a force for good going forwards, essentially. And it was around that time that I had the very bright idea of doing a stand-up comedy course. A very terrifying thing, but I wanted to do it. And, I looked into it, but they can be very expensive. In the hundreds of pounds. They can require a large time commitment. These were things I didn't have, kind of access to at the time. And there's also a lot of them out there. So kind of figuring out which one to do was also hard. So whilst I really wanted to do this course, I actually couldn't at the time for those reasons. So I sat on the idea. And then in 2022, as Mel said, my boss put me forward for the AQR Parker Prize for emerging talent. And what's really great about that award is that, you get all the glory, you get the bragging rights, but you also get a £500 prize fund towards personal development. And as soon as I started writing my submission, I just knew exactly what I was going to put the money towards if I won, and that was a stand-up comedy course. And as Mel said, I won that award in 2022. So basically, at the earliest opportunity, I booked a week-long intensive stand-up comedy course, took a week off for it, and I did that at the Bill Murray Comedy Club in Angel. Not sure if anyone's been before, but would highly recommend. It's one of the best in London, I've been told, and I've experienced as well. And when I did that course, I never wanted to pursue stand-up comedy as an alternative career. I didn't want to leave my career in market research to do stand-up comedy. I, you know, wanted to do it for other reasons. I wanted to improve, my confidence. I wanted to learn about comedy and how you write it and perform it and all of those sorts of things. But there were people on the course that I met, all of them were absolutely incredible. And some of them were looking to kind of make an actual career out of this, which they have done. And that's great. One person who I'm in contact with still, love her, Michelle. She's an Australian woman. She's had a bit of a rough time in her life, and that's kind of what led her to comedy. But she essentially used to be a private investigator over in Australia. Had some wild stories about that. Unfortunately, her husband cheated on her a fair few years ago. So she, did what she thought was best. She divorced him, absolutely. She left her life in Australia. She left her job as a PI, and she came over to the UK specifically to do this course. And she's done so well for herself that she's got a show at the Edinburgh Fringe this year. So I think that's kind of just testament to the power of these kind of courses. And like I said, I never wanted to pursue this as a full-time career. I have done a few gigs as an amateur, and I'm looking to do more of that as well in the future. And when I look back on that week, there was just, there was so much more to it, so much more to the course than learning how to make people laugh. That was obviously a big part, but when I look back, I see that it was a bunch of people, 14 people who have stories, who have shared experiences, lived experiences, getting together in a room and telling their stories to other people. And when you look at it, that's actually what, market research is all about. It's all about telling stories about other people. So I think that's kind of one of the first similarities between the two. And here are some pictures, as you can probably see, of my time on the comedy course. Now, that's my experience with stand-up. And I will spend most of the time talking about the similarities between the two and how they've kind of both helped with my kind of experience with each other. But I do want to address the kind of hypothetical elephant in the room, and that is that market research and stand-up comedy are very, very, very different. On the face of it, they are polar opposites. They are miles apart. Stand-up comedy is a golden retriever and market research is a Persian cat. Basically, think of two things that seem completely opposite. That's what market research and stand-up comedy are like. With market research, and we should all know this, we collect and analyze information to help us reach conclusions. And stand-up comedy is about standing on stage and making people laugh. It's very, very different worlds. But given the fact that I've worked in market research for 7 years and B, done stand-up comedy in a stand-up comedy course, having had both of those experiences, I can totally see and totally believe that they actually have a lot of similarities if you look a little bit deeper. And when I was putting this presentation together, which I think, a lot of these kind of presentations, a lot of these webinars, they always include a quote to help back up their kind of main point. So I wanted to do the same. So I, turned to Google, good old Google, and I found this quote, which I think just sums it up perfectly what I'm trying to say. And that is that there's more to market research than doing research, and there's more to stand-up comedy than making people laugh. And when I found this quote on Google, I just thought, wow, what are the chances? This perfectly sums up everything that I want to say and more. It's just perfect. And when I looked at the author of this quote, it was written by this really kind of intellectual person, philosopher, some might say, called Amanda Hammond. She wrote this in 2024, so fairly recently. And apparently she's a qualitative researcher, an amateur stand-up comedian, and a lover of the colour purple. Again, what are the chances of a quote like this existing? But here it is. So that's kind of, my experience with market research and stand-up comedy. Now I want to kind of spend the rest of the session exploring the similarities between the two, because as I've said, there are a lot of similarities. But before I kind of talk about my opinions on that, again, a little bit of audience participation. I would love to know in the chat box if you think the two are similar, and if so, how you think they're similar. But also, it's okay if you don't think they're similar, and I would love to hear that those opinions too. So, go and put it in the chat, and I'll kind of read through some and chat about them. So Sam, you're up first. Vulnerability and empathy. Absolutely. Vulnerability, I think, and again, when I'm talking about these, I'm kind of coming from my perspective. I think vulnerability, when you're presenting, you have to be quite vulnerable and, perhaps stand up in a room full of people and talk through results. So that's kind of where I see vulnerability across the two. Empathy, absolutely, especially if you're a qualitative researcher. You need to have a lot of empathy for participants. And I think stand-up comedians need to have that as well. Adam says both involve communicating a message. Absolutely. Communication, I think, is the kind of most prominent similarity between the two in many different ways. Alice says speaking to strangers. Yeah, absolutely. That is definitely true. Both require good observation skills. Camille, I feel like you've seen my presentation already. That is one thing I'm going to cover. So that's a good point. Keeping your audience engaged and attentive, absolutely. With research, we can sometimes be, talking through quite complex results. So we need to really make things engaging in order for people to remember stuff. And that's exactly what stand-up comedy does as well. You need to keep your audience engaged and make them laugh for stand-up comedy anyway. Engaging people, again, that's coming up. Storytelling from Catherine, absolutely. Like I said earlier, both are very much about taking the stories of yourself or other people and telling them to others. Lots of prep work, actual research for comedy, absolutely. This, my skills in market research definitely came in handy when I was, thinking about the sets that I was going to write and what to include in those. Storytelling, again, telling those human stories, absolutely. Engaging, coming out as well, having a point of view, absolutely, definitely having a point of view. Putting on a persona and connecting with people. This is a really interesting point that I don't go into detail within this session, but during the course, we were always told to think about who our persona is on stage. So, and that can stretch to what you're wearing, that can stretch to your mannerisms, your tone of voice, the pace that you talk at, all of those sorts of things as well. Samantha, seeing cultural nuances and overlaps, absolutely. I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. And Matt says, with both, you have to connect with people. Making people laugh in research on the street or clients always helps break the ice. Absolutely. Whenever I'm doing groups, whenever I'm doing interviews, I always try and include a little bit of humor in my moderation, just to help break that ice and build that rapport with people, and also with clients or stakeholders when it's appropriate. Lovely. Thank you all for sharing your thoughts. I will now go on to talk about why I think they're similar. And I think they are similar in a number of ways. And what I've done to bring that to life is I've created this acrostic, which took me an embarrassing amount of time to create. I will not say how long it took me to create, but I'm very proud of it. And I actually think it is my greatest work to date. I think this surpasses every single research presentation I've ever created, and I'm very proud of it. So what we've got here are 6 kind of skills, I suppose, that I think overlap between the two. So curiosity, courage, communication, listening, adaptability, and creativity. Also, I only noticed this the other day, but the fact that most of these words begin with the letter C is a pure coincidence. It just happened to be that way. but I thought that was just an interesting thing to note. And also just to say that, you know, there are 6 kind of skills, so to speak, here, but this is definitely not an extensive list. But these are just kind of the main ways that I think they're similar. However, I am going to kind of, you know, juxtapose myself a little bit, because I've outlined the 6 ways that I think they're similar. But for the purposes of this presentation, I'm only going to focus on the 3 most prominent skills, because people, you know, they tend to remember things in 3s. And that is a rule that we can use in research when we're kind of summarizing our findings. It's also something we use in comedy, you know, the rule of 3, a rule, you know, like a list of 3 things. So I thought that I would focus on the 3 most prominent ones, which are curiosity, courage, and adaptability. Now, I could go through each of these using, you know, words full of slides, words full of bullet points, but I think that would actually be quite boring. And I'm talking about stand-up comedy, which is, you know, it's all about fun. It's all about, you know, enjoying yourself and being engaging. So I also wanted to inject some fun into how I deliver these messages, I suppose. And to do so, I'm going to use my lovely cockapoo Chester, who is, I think he's 3 years old this year. And I'm going to use him to bring each of these to life. And that's because Chester, like stand-up comedians, like market researchers, also displays quite a lot of these skills. So I think he is the perfect vehicle for delivering this message. Also, cute dog pics. There will be a lot of cute dog pics. I hope you will find them cute. If not, I will be personally offended, and so will Chester. And also just to flag that no dogs were drunk in the taking of this photo. I promise. As you can see, the lid is still on his bottle of beer. And anyway, he prefers whiskey. He's more of a whiskey dog than a beer dog anyway. So, first things first, curiosity. And kind of I've pitched this as understanding the world around you. So as you can see, hopefully on screen, there's lots of pictures of Chester here, being very nosy, sticking his oar in perhaps where it's not wanted, under garden gates, under tables, through curtains, looking out the window. We've also got a picture of Chester overseeing my work, making sure that, you know, I was doing what I needed to do. He's a bit of a micromanager. And then also checking out the book I was reading, which I didn't understand because he's a dog and, you know, dogs can't read, but I let him do it anyway. So I suppose, how does curiosity apply to market research and stand-up comedy? Well, at its core, I think market research is really designed to find out what people think, feel, and do. Now, that could be, you know, how people are going to vote at the next election, which is a very prominent topic at the moment, or what they think of Love Island. 2 very equally important topics, I'm sure you all agree. And then once we kind of find out these things, find out these opinions and these behaviours, it's our job as researchers to tell it as it is, basically, to tell our clients, our stakeholders, our industry, these human truths, I suppose. And then with stand-up comedy, as some of you have mentioned when I asked you how you think they're similar, comedy involves a lot of observing what you as an individual think, feel, and do, but also observing what other people, you know, random strangers, celebrities, politicians think, feel, and do as well. And then telling that to an audience in a hopefully funny way. Otherwise, that would defeat the object. So, you know, both professions rely quite heavily on observation, on observing the wider world. But I do think there's a key difference, because comedy, these kind of observations can be bent and elaborated to make them funnier. So you can take an observation that is true, that has happened, and bend it and elaborate it slightly to make it funnier. As long as there is some truth to it, then that's the main thing. And we were always told on this comedy course, whenever we were thinking about sets or lines in a set, that we should kind of bring in these authentic observations, because when they're authentic, your audience can tell basically, and the way that you might perform it, if it's authentic versus inauthentic, could be different, and then how the audience kind of receive that can be different as well. So we're always told to kind of think of authentic observations, but put a bit of a spin on it. And actually, during my course, one piece of homework for us was to note down one observation per day that was interesting. And the goal of that was that by the end of the week, we'd have 5 or more observations that we could potentially use in a set. And I think that perspective has really helped me become a more curious researcher. It's helped me look out for the nuances of everyday life, because not everything is black and white. There is very much a grey area with most things. So it's helped me look out for those nuances, those minute details. But then also why that might be the case, why people are doing the things they're doing and thinking the things they're feeling. So that's curiosity. Don't worry, more chest picks to come with each of these skills. Secondly is courage. So I've kind of pitched this as being bold and taking risks. Again, plenty more chest picks of him this time being very courageous in various situations. So we've got him, the picture of him in the bathtub was, he basically jumped in a massive muddy puddle and had to be bathed straight afterwards, and he's also being courageous as he's getting bathed, because he doesn't enjoy being washed or dry cleaned. You can't dry clean dogs, you know what I mean. And then we've got some in the top there, we've got pictures of Chester being courageous towards other things. So a Santa statue around Christmas time near a house in the area that my parents live in, him confronting a balloon, so he likes confronting things. And then also him, stealthily and courageously trying to steal my sausage roll, thinking I can't see him. And as well, some pictures of him just, courageous is a word, but maybe downright stupid, climbing on furniture in reckless ways. So that's Chester being courageous. And I think in market research, we should absolutely take risks when it kind of comes to lots of different things. So whether that's new ways of recruiting people that we haven't tried before, new methodologies. I think, there's a lot of kind of push around being innovative with new methodologies, but then also kind of on the day-to-day level. So like new ways of asking questions in questionnaires or in discussion guides, and then also new ways of communicating insight as well. So rather than your bog standard PowerPoint, how can you be innovative with the way that you communicate those insights? And this kind of idea of being courageous very much applies to stand-up comedy as well. So, you should take risks when it comes to the venues you perform at and the people you perform to. So if you're always kind of used to performing at comedy clubs in central London, they will be very different to crowds at comedy clubs in a small town outside of London, or in the north, for example. But then also being courageous with the types of comedy you perform. And it's okay to have in comedy a style that you like, a style that you resonate with, that you enjoy, but then it's, seeing how you can bring in other things from different comedy types as well, just to see how it goes, and try something new, basically. And performing comedy has really helped me be courageous in my career, but also in life more generally. It's pretty obvious, right? There's nothing quite like trying to make a room full of strangers laugh to really push you outside of your comfort zone. So in that way, it's definitely made me more courageous. It's definitely made me, just push myself and my limits a little bit. But I suppose on a slightly deeper level, it's made me just take opportunities that scare me. So my job at Sky, that was quite a scary role for me to take. And even hosting sessions like this, I was really nervous about this session. And I was saying that to Mel and Bella earlier, I was really nervous about this, but now that I'm halfway through, and when I'm done, I'll be really proud that I've done this. And even kind of day-to-day smaller things like making suggestions in meetings, you know, I now feel like I have more courage to be able to do that. And look, you can do these things, you can be courageous, and sometimes it won't work out. You know, it won't go to plan. That's okay. And one quote that we were given on this comedy course that's actually stuck with me is that every set isn't a referendum on your self-worth. And you could take out the word set and you could put in the word presentation and the idea would still apply. So I, you know, use that when I think about comedy, but also when I think about my job in market research as well. So that's kind of a quote that stuck with me. And then we were also kind of given some more tangible things to try, I suppose, as well, which could be applied to both comedy and research. So Sarah Millican, very famous comedian, hopefully you've all heard of her. She actually has this rule that if a set goes really well or really poorly, then she either celebrates or commiserates that set until 11 a.m. the next day, and then she moves on. Another kind of tip I was given is that you can set a timer for how long you might feel bad about a set. Probably works in that context. And then you should try and beat that next time, which I think are two, you know, quite interesting ways of getting over that, I suppose, that guilt, maybe that shame if something doesn't go to plan. And now I appreciate these things are much easier said than done. And when I've tried this, sometimes it doesn't work, and that's okay. But it, you know, I suppose it's just things to think about, and you know, ideas that could be applied to working in research for presentations, I think, in particular. So that's courage. Next up, we have adaptability. This is the last kind of similarity I'm going to talk about. This is actually my favorite set of Chester picks. There were so many I could have included for adaptability, but here are just some of his finest moments adapting to situations that he's found himself in. A lot of them with kind of objects, so plant pots, sellotape rolls, toilet roll holder. He's very kind of adaptable and he overcomes. So I think we can all learn something from that. Yeah, Samantha, I wish I was as adaptable as Chester. Exactly. Maybe after this session you will be. Take that inspiration from Chester. It's mainly because obviously he doesn't have opposable thumbs, so he can't hold things normally. So yeah, he has to adapt. Anyway, I've spoken about kind of, you know, courage, and I think that courage, you know, taking risks is actually linked very closely to adaptability. So, you know, I've mentioned that we should be bold and take risks in our jobs, but then not everything will pay off. Not everything will go to plan. That is okay. And as well as the kind of tips I was given on how to deal with feeling bad about a set, I was also given tips on how to be more adaptable. So I was told that you should know your set inside and out, but leave yourself room to kind of go with the flow. Like you should leave yourself with some wiggle room. And that could be things like knowing what to say if your jokes aren't landing, like the classic, oh, tough crowd line. Harry Hill, we were told of a Harry Hill line when his jokes aren't landing. He says something like, well, I don't care if you laugh or not because I've got a chicken in the oven at home, or something like that, which is just downright silly, but it's, you know, thinking about those things when jokes aren't landing. Also how you deal with kind of random noises or drunken hecklers is the biggest challenge. You know, those people that are trying to impress their mates by heckling the comedians but are actually just making themselves look like an idiot. Please don't be that person in a comedy show. You will probably get roasted by the comedian that is performing. And I think this also kind of extends to after a set as well. So reminding yourself of jokes that have landed, what jokes didn't land. And actually, if anyone's been to a kind of comedy gig, you might have seen that comedians will often either bring their phone on stage to record the set, or they'll have someone professionally recording it in the back so that they can watch their set after the fact and see kind of how it went and where the laughs were and where they weren't. And that's something that I've done for comedy, but it's also something I've done when rehearsing presentations for work, or I've watched recordings of myself moderating focus groups, which are horrible and horrendous things to watch, but very, very important for, your development and your improvement. And I do really think that stand-up comedy has helped me be more adaptable as a qualitative researcher, because you are dealing in both situations with real people in real life situations. People can sometimes be annoying. People can, be like herding cats out of a wet paper bag. It can be difficult to manage people in both of those situations. But given my experience with comedy, I now feel so much more comfortable. Managing participants in particular is the example I'll give, as well as things that might go wrong, technical issues, sound not working in a back room whilst clients are working, fire alarms going off, all of that kind of jazz. So that's how stand-up has helped me be more adaptable. Gosh, this went so quick. We're coming up to the end. And I just want to kind of summarize what I've said in a nutshell and my session as a whole with a final quote. And that is, if it loads, you can learn something from everything. Any guesses who this quote came from? It's more a rhetorical question. You don't need to actually post in the chat. But of course, it came from me. Another very, very wise and profound philosophical quote. I think you'll agree. And I don't want to toot my own horn, but I do think this quote kind of brilliantly sums up my key takeaway for this session. And that is that you really can find inspiration in everything. You really can improve your professional life and your career by learning from your personal life. And for me, that was stand-up comedy. And now I would like to know if anyone here watching the session has a side hustle or a hobby that has helped them with their career in market research. And as Bella mentioned earlier, if you want to kind of speak about this rather than post it in the chat, then we can unmute you and you can tell us about it. Now, I can't see anything, so I'm going to rely on Bella and Mel to, if anyone has any experience, but it's also okay if you don't.
Hey, Amanda, you can't see the chat?
I can see the chat, but I can't see if anyone's got their hand raised.
Oh, okay.
Has anyone got their hand raised?
I'm throwing that to Bella because I can't see either.
No hands raised just yet.
Okay. We do have a question in the Q&A, Amanda. Any good comedy books in brackets to read that you would recommend?
Yes, I literally just finished Joe Lycett's book, Parsnips Buttered. I read it in like 2 days. I couldn't put it down. And for anyone that knows Joe Lycett, he takes one of my kind of rules of observing, and the minute details of life, and basically spins them and makes them funny. So he talks all about how he responds to parking fines, how he, would change the train system, and how he would, do all of these things, basically using emails and tweets and things like that. So I would recommend Joe Lycett's book, Parsnips Buttered. Yeah.
That's a great title as well. Makes me hungry.
It is. Apparently it's like a ye oldie kind of term. I can't remember for the life of me what it actually means, but
yes, that's ringing a bell actually now you said that, but yeah, I'll have to Google that one afterwards. In terms of, if anyone has any side hustles. Oh, we've got something in the chat. I'm seeing what looks like a really interesting.
I think lots of things across the years. Did dance and drama when I was younger, helping at an archery stall, rounders and training, confident, reading, observation, and being more open to alternate opinions, and the idea of bias awareness and how to avoid it, gardening, patience, and nurturing. I especially the reading and the gardening. I'm a big reader and a big gardener. Those things definitely apply, and have helped me, especially patience with perhaps tricky stakeholders, tricky clients, or projects that aren't going to plan, you definitely need that patience, and absolutely reading, kind of opening up your world, and hearing kind of other perspectives. And that's essentially what we're trying to do in research as well. If anyone, reading, you can end up wanting a murdered to get away with it. It's mad.
Yeah, I love a crime book myself. Yeah, I can relate.
Exactly. I love a true crime documentary as well as a book. I do improv from Camille. It's helped me a lot to become more spontaneous, adaptable, and I agree with everything you said. Thank you. I appreciate you agreeing with everything I said. That's always nice to hear. Yeah, I can see how improv and stand-up comedy are kind of quite closely linked in some ways. So and also I kind of went to drama school, not like drama school, but on a Saturday when I was growing up, and very much learn about improv and things like that. So yeah, being spontaneous and adaptable certainly helps. Yeah, Leon, also a Saturday for me with drama. Yeah, Saturday drama crew, love that. If anyone doesn't have any kind of hobbies or side hustles that have helped their career, that's absolutely fine. I suppose what we can do to finish the session, and if we can finish a little bit earlier, then that's great for everyone. But I just wondered if anyone has any more general questions about either my career in market research or my experience with stand-up comedy. So if you want to post them in the chat, then feel free. If not, then we can always wrap up a little bit early.
Amanda, I've got one from somebody who couldn't make the session.
Okay.
If you had to give one piece of advice to someone considering pursuing a side hustle, what would it be?
It's gonna be cliche, but just do it. Just bloody do it. Like, I was thinking about a quote earlier. It's, feel the fear, but do it anyway. I think is very much applies to side hustles, particularly things like stand-up comedy, which are perhaps a little bit more scary. But yeah, I think even if you try something, whatever that might be, you'll learn from it. And whether you choose to pursue it or not going forwards is, up to you. But even if you didn't, then you will always learn something from it that you can apply to, your career, your wider life more generally. So just do it, because you never know what might come from it as well. So for me, with this comedy course, I've made so many good friends off the back of it. I've seen these friends perform, so as I've mentioned, some of them have gone on to perform at the Edinburgh Fringe and are doing so this year. And that has opened my perspective as well to their different lived experiences. So just do it, just go for it, learn what you can from it, because you never know where it might take you, I suppose. I see one in the Q&A, I think. Have you ever done any stand-up training for the people you work with to try and dial up these skills? That's a great question. No, I've not, but you've sparked an idea that I might well take back to Sky. So thank you for that suggestion. I think that's a really good answer, a really good question, sorry. And I'm gonna definitely think about it and pitch it. Any other questions? Oh, got anonymous attendee. What's the next thing you'd like to try to push yourself out of your comfort zone and learn something new? That's a great one. I think not something like comedy again, but I'm kind of a big advocate for doing like a big physical challenge every year. So I've done skydives, and this is all kind of for charity. So I've done skydives in the past. I want to do the 3 Peaks challenge on behalf of Mind. So climb Ben Nevis, Snowdon, and Phyllis Pike, I think is how you pronounce it. So yeah, that's going to be my next goal, I suppose, and challenge to really push me outside of my comfort zone. So again, completely different to stand-up comedy, but equally challenging in its own way. And I'm sure I could learn things from that as well. Cool. I can't see any more questions. Last chance for people to send questions in, but it's okay if you don't have them. We can finish a few minutes early.
I think as well, yeah, if anyone thinks of anything afterwards that they think, oh, wish I'd asked that, feel free to pass it on. We will, of course, pass it on to Amanda. And I'm sure you'll be happy for us to share the responses with everyone.
Absolutely. And also, if you want to contact me, want to follow me on anything, I'm on LinkedIn. So please do go and find me on there. And yeah, I hope you've all enjoyed it. I hope you've learned something. I hope you're feeling inspired to push yourself out of your comfort zone and try something new. And if stand-up comedy is what you'd like to do to help that, then hit me up and I can.
I'm just going to do a quick plug there. If you are thinking of pushing yourself out of your comfort zone and doing something new, don't forget, and more leadership team members, we would greatly appreciate your enthusiasm and ideas. I'll pop in the link in the chat again, just so it's there for you. And there we go. Thank you so much, Amanda.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Have 2
you.
minutes back. Thanks all.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for attending. Bye.
Bye.